Well, hello everybody, welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. Oh, my friends, there's so much, the world is in such a state, is it not? There's so much going on, and one of the many potent issues of our current culture moment is indeed the issue of transgenderism, which translates more broadly into the issue of the self-perception, and then weighing that with reality, and then trying to see how the two meld or how the two don't meld, or trying to just come up with some kind of product of intellection, some kind of solution out of all of this. Because then you have the issue of transgenderism, then you have the issue of how politics interacts with transgenderism, and so many other things. And I'm starting a series of videos called Meditations, where I just go and give my thoughts about issues, just my raw, unfiltered thoughts, like I normally do. But I don't particularly prepare for these videos. I just come to you with my understanding and I lay it before your feet for your consideration. That's how you can, I think that's the best way to approach issues. And every week we're going to do one of these videos on any given topic. And I picked transgenderism because the issue of gender ideology has been so profoundly important in many areas of our country, particularly with the controversy over Disney and their attempt to market certain kinds of ideas about sexuality and gender to children in their programming, and then the corresponding response of governments like Florida Ron DeSantis, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida's government, to essentially go after Disney and other companies for embracing such programming and such ideas by depriving them of their tax statuses or whatever. And also the entire debacle over what a woman is, which was sparked, or at least the modern iteration of it was sparked by KBJ's non-answer during her confirmation hearing. But of course, the intellectual roots of that idea go all the way back to the 90s, and even before then, all the way back to the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, all the way back to the birth of postmodernism in our current civilization. So you're dealing with one layer of an issue on top of another layer of an issue on top of one layer, just multiple layers of one problem that gets incredibly even more complex the more you boil it down to. And yet sometimes how we interact with those problems doesn't have to be complex, so to speak. And so I picked this issue because it is of profound importance. And I hear a lot of different ideas and talking points about transgenderism, and about the entire spectrum as well as heterodoxy, whether it be gender non-conforming, non-binary, things of that sort. I see and hear a lot of different perspectives. On the right, there appears to be this sense that transgenderism, qua transgenderism, that means transgenderism in its capacity, is some kind of mental disease. And this is evidenced by two things: the idea that gender dysphoria is integral to transgenderism, and number two, the enhanced amount of suicidality rates amongst transgender adolescents and transgender adults. Well, 2 points on this. Number one, gender dysphoria is what someone feels before they transition. And the idea, for those of you who are unacquainted, is that someone feels uncomfortable with the sex that they are per se born into, and that causes them a significant amount of emotional distress. So in a sense, the process that leads up to transgenderism is marked by mental difficulty, and the empirics definitely bear this out, and I will explain that in a second. However, gender dysphoria is said to be resolved when someone conforms their behaviors and conforms their bodies towards their perceived gender identity. Indeed, the Williams Institute noted that there are plenty of risk factors for transgender suicidality, which we'll get into in a moment. But one of the unique factors to that is that when someone is able, and this comes from the website, I'll put this in the link below, when someone is able to transition and conform their being, their body, to what they believe they are, the prevalence of suicide rates actually goes down. The amount of mental distress someone has also goes down as well. And yet when people don't transition, they tend to have higher suicide rates and higher mental distress. I think the problem that many on the right have with their reasoning is that they presume They look at effects without considering causes. The relationship between cause and effect is the most important thing for our knowledge. And you cannot simply look at the suicide rates or the mental distress under which transgender people tend to labor under without considering causes. Now, here's the problem with this, though. The only base for cause that we have for transgender suicide rates comes from the transgender or a self-reporting mechanism, a qualitative self-reporting mechanism. What does that mean? That simply means that researchers go to a certain person and they ask them about their experience as opposed to observing their actions. Qualitative versus quantitative data. And so, essentially, when someone tells you the reasons they have suicide ideation, and sometimes suicidal actions, then the only thing you have to work off of is their word. Unless you want to project your own thoughts into why you think they have that, and without any sufficient data, that seems to be an exercise in prejudice and not an exercise in reason or philosophy. So let me give you some numbers here. In the United Kingdom, in the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2018, there was a study published. And the study found something. The study wanted to basically look into why certain subgroups of transgenders had higher suicide rate and why others didn't. Because the suicide rate amongst transgenders is not universal. It actually varies immensely. And the result of this study was essentially, I'll read it for you right here, that nearly 14% of adolescents reported a previous suicide attempt. Disparities by gender identity in suicide attempts were found. So in general, 14% of adolescents in America, as of 2018, as the data has shown, had a suicide attempt. But when you go down to gender identity, there is a huge disparity. Female to male adolescents, these are transgender adolescents, not regular ones, reported the highest rate of attempted suicide, 50.8%, followed by adolescents who identified as not exclusively male or female, 41.8%. Then male adolescents, 29.9%, questioning adolescents, 27.9%, female adolescents, 17.6%, and then male adolescents, 9.8%. So it appears that a huge factor in the overall numbers of transgender suicidality is actually female to male adolescents. Why does the disparity exist? The data is limited. Because once again, you can look at the risk factors that are unique to transgenders, but all of those risk factors are self-reported. And someone's biases about themselves can taint the truth of their condition. This is the problem. While I agree, and I'll get into this in a second, while I agree with the broader critiques of gender fluidity being a non-concept and things of that sort, I don't agree that suicidality in and of itself is endemic, inherent to the transgender condition, because if there is inherent, then why are there different rates amongst different sorts of people who tend to have these kind of ideations? And also, if it is inherent, then how come the Williams Institute study shows that when transgenders get married or when they transition with hormone replacement therapy, they tend to have much lower rates of mental distress? These are the numbers. These are the data. And look, here's another problem. Data is limited. Because obviously, transgenderism is not merely a condition of the body, it's a condition of the mind as well. And data cannot access the mind. We don't have the technology to do that. The mind is a spiritual entity. The mind can only be accessed by the people who are thinking things when they speak it. Otherwise, it's conjecture. This is one of the reasons why I haven't been so quick to condemn transgender people. Number one, because I am a Christian and I believe that God loves every single person in the world. And even if I was not a Christian, I am compelled by my own natural principle of self-love, trying to preserve and love myself best I can, to therefore let my love flow out onto other people like a river. So I don't condemn anyone. Plus, what room do I have to condemn anyone? I have my own faults. But that's a different story. So if we've established that we can't necessarily link transgenderism to mental illness simply by suicidality, when we've established that transgenders who transition tend to have lower rates of suicidality, and we also recognize the inherent limitations of the self-reporting mechanism in statistics, then how do we handle this condition? How does the thinking man handle the transgender condition? How does that happen? Well, another thing should be said as well. Even though, as I mentioned, if you were that the level of suicidality and mental distress reported by transgenders who transitioned is lower, the level of suicidality and mental stress reported by people who have detransitioned is actually much, 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 much higher. I will read it right here. I have it pulled up right here. This is from the Williams Institute. They say those who had a detransition at some point, meaning having gone back to living according to their sex assigned at birth, were significantly more likely to report suicide thoughts and attempts, both past, during lifetime, than those who had never detransitioned. Nearly 12% of those who detransitioned attempted suicide in the past year compared to 6.7% of those who had not detransitioned. So it's not a given that everyone who transitions automatically has a mentally healthy state. That's not true. But again, statistics are limited. Data is limited because when you're dealing with thoughts and beliefs, you're dealing with spiritual attitudes. And when you're dealing with spiritual attitudes, you may not be able to falsify them entirely. That's why I want my people, you guys, I want people on the right anywhere to stop being so bound to the coarse grained chart. It can't tell you everything. It can tell you a lot. It's important, but it can't tell you anything. And this is where philosophy comes in, because using data without philosophy is mere sophistry. And there's a lot of sophists today in this sphere that I'm in. I won't say any names. I'm not trying to talk to anyone because you never know who is going to be there one day to help you or push you along or motivate you when you're down. So I don't talk about anybody. I don't know anybody. I don't like the gossip. I don't like any of that kind of stuff. But there are sophists out there trying to use stats without first checking their priors and establishing first principles. I've also heard people mention that transgenderism itself is a condition of Cartesianism. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Cartesianism, Cartesianism is simply the thought of René Descartes, who is a theorist, philosopher, who had something called the mind-body dichotomy. I think, therefore I am. You may have heard it popularly called. And some believe that transgenderism is actually a result of this, but it's not. Let me read a little bit from you. This is from the Discourse on Method, Part 4. This is where one of the many places across 3 works where Descartes talks about the mind-body principle, which is going to be the principles of philosophy, meditations on first philosophy, and Discourse on Method. This is one of the 3 places where he talks about it. He says this. He said, I resolved to feign that all the things that had ever entered my mind were not more true than the illusions of my dreams. But immediately after I noticed that while I thus chose to think that everything was false, it was necessarily true that I, who was thinking this, was something. And observing that this truth, I think therefore I am, was so firm and so assured that all the most extravagant suppositions of the skeptics were incapable of shaking it, I judged that I could accept it without scruple as the first principle of the philosophy that I was seeking. And he goes on to explain what he means more by what is I? What do you mean I think therefore I am? But what he basically means, and I'll give you guys sources of this as well, as I always do, what he basically means is that in this book, The Discourse on the Method, he's talking about his dissatisfaction with the world's knowledge. Descartes thought, he says at the very beginning of the book, he thought that if he had learned from all the great men of his age and read a lot of the main texts of his age, he would have complete knowledge of the world. But when he found out that was true and he had more questions than he had answers, he had a crisis of self. He basically began rejecting every single thing in the world until he got down to the point where he said, you know what? Everything in the world has doubts in it, but I do not doubt one thing. The only thing I do not doubt is that I am. I'm thinking. I am a being. I am a soul. I'm thinking, therefore I exist. But he also said that the body is simply like a mortal coil. I is contained in the soul. So what Descartes' really saying is that the mind is entirely separate from the body. He even said that he doesn't even need the body to basically exist. I exist independent of the body. Now there's problems with this, obviously. This is a very gross oversimplification. But here's the point. Transgenderism is not merely a condition of the mind. It is also a condition of the body. And the mind-body dichotomy does not cover transgenderism for that very reason. But when I think of transgenderism, I have to think about questions of the self. Who am I? And how much control do I have over who I am? And in all honesty, my friends, I like to think about this in terms of natural law. So the self is contained in a body. A body has a lot of different factors to it. All these factors are regulated by higher order processes. Your body's regulated by the heart, parts of it by the brain. The brain mostly is actually the main regulator of your body, but the heart, of course, does things as well. It's like a semi-regulator. And all these different processes work together, all the different systems of your body, of which there are many, work together to keep you functioning. And without the body, you don't have any other vessel by which to interact with this world. Now, I do believe that we are higher beings than merely to be reduced to bodies. We are higher. We have faculties that are more excellent than just this crude matter. What did Yoda say, right? Luminous beings are we, not just this crude matter. I believe that because intellection, the process of thinking, the process of dealing with the world in abstraction, intellection reflects something that no other animal on this earth has the capacity to do. So I believe, indeed, human beings are special. We are higher than, I think, nature, higher than this material crust on ourselves. Our existences prove that. This is a prima facie fact, in my opinion, that is oftentimes neglected. And that's the problem, my friends. When we can accept that we are higher than this crude matter, we should also be able to accept, though, and since this crude matter is bound by processes and our thinking requires a vessel to move, it may not be entirely wise to metamorphosize into a different kind of being. You have to be willing. I'm doing my best not to offend anybody. You have to be willing to completely appreciate the magnificent creature you are in the broad tapestry of nature to really embody your highest potential, to really embody the sort of spiritual value of the human being. And sometimes transgenderism can seem like a retreat from that. Now, look, I've got nothing but love in my heart for people who have that condition. I've got nothing but love and kindness in my heart, which is one of the reasons why I try to make it very clear that I'm not entirely sure if they're mentally. I don't believe that someone is inherently mentally ill if they're transgender. I think that's wrong. And I may make some of my followers mad. That's fine. Look, guys, I'm not here to appease your beliefs. I'm a philosopher. I'm here to challenge you and push you. But what I do not believe is that the body is disposable or the body is a designer object. I don't believe that. But what I do think is that there are things that people can do to make the body easier to handle. Some of those things are good, some of them are bad, some of them are healthy, some of them are not. Some people suffer from chronic fatigue and want to drink caffeine all day, like me. Well, I don't suffer from chronic fatigue, but caffeine's pretty good. That's a problem if you do it too much. Some people don't like the way their chest is or the way their bottom is. Some folks don't like the way their hair is. Me. Some folks, for many different reasons that I can't go into in this video, because they're too complex and too variable and infinitely created, have something about themselves they don't like. But self-love is the basis of you being able to operate in life. That's not some feel-good thing. It's literally a principle. Because before we can love other people, we have to find the principle in ourselves and our own existence. It exists, but we have to recognize it. Because if we don't recognize it, we're going to act in a very different way. Human beings conform their mind to certain expectations. And perhaps the issue of transgenderism is one of self-love. Now, some may say, well, I'm transitioning because I want to love myself. But you're already good how you are. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional. This is it's very intense. You're already good how you are. And but then again, I'm not the person to regulate your happiness. I'm not the person to do that. No one else is either. But again, your happiness should exist within reasonable boundaries. But then again, we've got categories for a reason. I've always said, and this kind of goes into the relationship between sex and reality, because sex absolutely does exist. Gender exists as well. These are not social constructs. These are biological facts. I've often said that if someone wants to call themselves a trans man or a trans woman, go ahead. Fine. As long as you recognize that that is separate from a biological woman or a biological man. Because if you're a trans man now, you are recognizing that you have transitioned into that condition and it is not natural to you, which then, therefore, does not compel someone to conform their expectations to you as if you are a biological woman. Because a lot of the conversation we've had around trans people, I gotta go, I got a few minutes left, is the issue of pronouns. And the argument is that I am a real woman, or I'm a real man, or I'm a biological real. What is real, right? I'm a biological man, and therefore, I have to be regarded just as such. But maybe if some trans folks, some do this, like Blair White and other people, some already do this. But maybe if some trans folks just put a line in the sand and said, I recognize what my biological condition is, and I recognize what my mental condition is, what my spiritual condition is, and I recognize that the two may not be the same, but I would much rather have this spiritual condition be the one that people recognize me as, and guess what? That's fine. That's not the same thing as calling a man a woman or a woman a man, the old tired talking point. That's not the same thing. That is not the same thing at all. What it is saying you have a perception of yourself, and regardless if I agree with it or not, you are another human being, and as a friend or as a comrade or as a passerby or whatever, I have an obligation to respect your liberty. I have an obligation to respect you as a human being and to not regard you as a throwaway or a miscreant, because you may be very well going against the truth of who you are, or you may very well just be splitting who you are. I don't know. I'm not saying this is just how some of the rationalizations here. Maybe that's the solution. If trans folks just recognize themselves in their proper category, and again, some already do this, by the way, then maybe the conversations, the difficulties surrounding transgenderism wouldn't be so profound. But so long as a contingent of gender ideological activists mobilize themselves to browbeat people into believing things that violate both the conscience and the facts of reality, more trans people will get hurt. I believe we're going to possibly see more mental issues. Because again, the self-reporting mechanism says that one of the factors is societal acceptance or not. I don't know how true that is, because again, we can filter things through our perceptions and then report things that may not be so. Self-reporting is limited. But regardless, I know where the road leads if these activists and these intellectuals who are trying to recreate reality have their way. And it leads nowhere good. And I want to lead all of us, all human beings, transgender, gay, straight, whatever, Hindu, Buddhist, I don't care, Muslim. I want to lead all of us towards a better world, a world that acknowledges your liberty and your individuality before it acknowledges anything else, and sees your fundamental value as a human being for the main part of who you are. That's your portion. Think on it, my friends. I'm sorry I almost got emotional, but this is just a very touchy subject because I'm dealing with human beings here. I love people. But I also love you guys as well. And if you love me, please be sure to support me. Please go to patreon.com/officialcwatson, or please go to PayPal, officialcwatson@gmail.com. Please support me at my locals, christianwatsonlocals.com, or go to my Discord, which is in the comment section down below. Please like, share, subscribe, and share this video, subscribe to my channel. My friends, you may not agree with me entirely on this one. I know that some people will not agree with me at all. Some people will say, Christian, that's an abomination. Look, I'm not here to entertain just your thoughts. I'm here to push your thoughts. It could be possible that I've been wrong this entire time. But it is my hope that you will engage with me faithfully and you will see my arguments for what they are and my meditations for what they are. Reflections on difficult issues that concern us all. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.